Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us again for a Scale Up Milwaukee Meet the Masters session. We're very excited to introduce to you and present to you Lincoln Fowler, co-founder of now Colectivo. Let's just get a few of our housekeeping things out of the way. First and foremost, telephones. We invite you to keep your phones on, to take pictures, to engage the outside world via social media. Our Twitter handle is at ScaleUpMKE. I think it's actually ScaleUp_MKE. So please tag us in photos. But we would ask that you turn off your ringers and all the noise makers. Second, we have evaluations on all of the tables, and we invite you to, we request actually that you fill out the evaluation on your way out and leave it with Elizabeth, or you can give it to any of the Scale Up Milwaukee team. These evaluations are important for us to understand how we're doing. You'll also notice that there's 2 questions at the bottom that asks about the climate for growth in this region. And we are excited to take this temperature and be able to tell a story in years about the change in growth ambition in Milwaukee. Thirdly, we ask that you write suggestions for other Meet the Masters speakers that you would enjoy seeing. And we try to take those very seriously and accommodate who you request.
Help that person.
And we're gonna help that last person. Maybe we can stick the, yeah. Let's welcome them as they come in. Thank you so much. Yay, all right. Okay, so you ready? If it's not very clear, the name of this session is Meet the Masters. It is not hear from, it is not see, it is not watch, it is meet. So I expect this to be a conversation in which we can all partake. So at any time, please do raise your hands and we'll acknowledge you. But I have tons of questions and tons of research that I'm happy to use to start the conversation. So,
please ask questions. Far more interesting.
It makes it more fun for all of us. I want to read a great quote. So one thing we do know is that in 1993, you, your brother, and a friend, Paul, so your brother Ward and your friend Paul, started what was then Altera. Mm-hmm. And I just found something really interesting that I'd love to read. So first, for point of reference, Starbucks in 1993 had fewer than 300 locations globally. Set the tone. This was realistically a pre-internet era.
Totally.
And I found this lovely quote. In 1993, Full House was airing on ABC. Bill Clinton had just taken office and Kurt Cobain was very much alive. Starbucks had fewer than 300 stores in the world, only a handful in Chicago, and none in New York City. Altera was incorporated officially right before Thanksgiving, and a space probe headed for Mars went rogue and stopped responding to the signals from NASA, just to set the tone. So, if you will, tell us a little bit about those early moments when you all started this company.
Well, as I was saying to some folks earlier, this environment is very familiar because we actually started in the tannery complex just to our west here, and these Cream City brick and timber buildings, that's where we started. But we were there not because we wanted to start a coffee company. We were there because we were manufacturing high-performance home audio loudspeakers, and my brother and I, this was something that we really wanted to do, and we didn't know any better, so we decided to start our own company, and that failed. So it's not a long pathway of success. It's one marked with failure, and I really think that failure is one of the critical components to success because you don't learn much if you're always winning. Anyway, we were in the tannery complex in the 5th floor of Building 21, manufacturing loudspeakers, spending 50 or 60 hours a week doing that, and because we weren't selling any, we were dirt poor and needed to feed ourselves, so we were working another 20 plus hours a week waiting tables or tending bar. I was a terrible bartender. But that all adds up to a whole lot of work and not a lot of sleep. So it was, and this is actually true. I mean, we were short on sleep, we were operating power tools, which is never a great combination, which we can get to. But we were the few extra dollars, and literally we were like eating government cheese and really cheap Braunschweiger for calorie intake. But the few dollars we had extra, we spent on coffee, and it was that coffee that drew our partner Paul, who was also on the 5th floor of Building 21 selling sheepskin slippers. And his very excellent nose drew him to us. He actually turned out to be our best loudspeaker customer as well. We sold him several pairs. They're all over the United States now in his siblings' homes. And we were always impressed with Paul because he always paid in cash, which we loved. But anyway, that's what got us together, and that's what we started talking about doing a business together, and that's how this all started.
So I'm interested that you talk about the lessons from failure and the necessary lessons from failure. You've also said very publicly that your secret weapon, your number one secret weapon was, do you remember what you said?
No.
It was hubris was an asset.
There you go.
When we started our company.
Totally.
So what was different when you started a loudspeaker company when you started then Altera?
Well, we didn't know what the hell we were doing in either case, but I think one of the best assets we had when we started Altera was the fact that we had Paul, our partner, who we very affectionately call Paul Retail Scum, because it is just baked into his DNA. And he understood much better than Ward or I how to actually sell a product. Conversely, Paul didn't really understand how to manufacture something, and that's something that intuitively Ward and I kind of got. It was the combination of Paul's retail sense and ability to sell, coupled with our ability to kind of decode. To bring you back, you said you were kind of setting the stage. Back in 1993 or 92, freshly roasted coffee was a novelty, and it was the manufacturers of equipment, this is getting a little technical, but the manufacturers of brewing equipment, Bunn and Fetco and all these other people, American Metalware is what Starbucks uses. Anyway, they were used to brewing coffee that had been sitting around for months. And when fresh roasted coffee came on the scene, fresh coffee, when it comes out of the coffee roaster, is outgassing tons of carbon dioxide. You don't see it, but it's outgassing all this carbon dioxide. You tear up the bean when you grind it, and that just accelerates the process. And when you try to put hot water over outgassing coffee, the coffee kind of repels the water. It's like sand on a beach. Sometimes you pour water on, and the water just slides off. Same thing goes on with coffee. And when you brew coffee, it's basically it's an extraction process. It's a little chemistry experiment on your countertop. You're trying to dissolve the solids in the coffee into the water, and if the water is being repelled by the coffee, that process doesn't work very well. Well, Ward and I got onto this, and we were, oddly, on the 5th floor of Building 21. We had a dart manufacturer, we had some artists, we had a bunch of other people. It was a very big floor. But one of the guys that we had right next to us was a machinist. And Al, the machinist, Al Brown, helped us to modify coffee brewing equipment to more effectively brew the coffee. So it was not like we had a corner on the market in terms of great roasted coffee, although it was good. What we did do much better than anybody else was actually translate the coffee into a brewed beverage, so that we dissolved more of the coffee into the water. And our coffee, strong coffee served here since 1993, that's quite intentional because our coffee literally was stronger. And that's actually accelerated over time. We keep putting more coffee in the coffee. But that is what, that ability to manufacture, if you will, coupled with the marketing prowess of Paul, combined to create something that was successful.
I love it.
I don't specialize in short answers, so I apologize.
So it wouldn't be a Scale Up Milwaukee event if we didn't talk about growth. You said if 21 years on, it was still about just strong coffee, I wouldn't be here any longer. You know, the mythology of Colectivo is really about these three men starting a business in this unlikely place and then this massive name change. What I want to focus on in this conversation is how you went from one kiosk to the headquarters on Prospect to now 16 locations. Tell the story of how you grew the company.
We grew it organically. We grew it with an aversion to debt. We are, your best partner as a business person is the bank, because they don't take a piece of your equity and they don't tell you what to do by and large. So the bank was our friend, but even as a small business, you don't have much of a banking relationship because you don't have any assets, and typically the bank doesn't loan you anywhere close to your assets. So early on it was cash flow and eating dirt. At the beginning, Ward and I didn't take a salary for I think 2 years. Paul didn't take a salary for 4 or 5 because he had an alternate source of income. And we funded ourselves through that cash flow, which is why, I'm speaking to a more mature audience here, and it's not that this doesn't apply, but starting a business is really great for the hubris-laden 27-year-old. Mm-hmm. You don't know what you can't do, so you think you can do anything, which is excellent for starting a business because most of them fail. And it's also a great time because you don't have a wife, you don't have kids, you don't have a mortgage, you don't have car payments. We actually, when we applied for our first line of credit, here's another long answer, we applied to U.S. Bank for a line of credit, and the bankers took our personal financial statements, and they came back, and they were talking to Paul, actually, because Paul was leading the charge on that, and they wanted to know how my brother Ward lived, because there was so little on there was no rent, there were no food expenses, there was just no income. So we put our heads down and just bulldogged it for the first couple of locations. And then we started to get a little momentum, but as I was saying to you, that it's that point where you have something, but you don't have any institutional momentum. And you feel like you could blip off the radar screen anytime, and no one would really notice. So that's makes you really frickin' nervous.
Yeah. So you have this opportunity to talk to folks that own businesses that are, by external measures, very successful. They've got employees, they've got real products and services, but they might be stalling in their growth. What is your suggestion to catalyze that bump, that inertia that they need to get to the next level?
I'm not a fount of wisdom on this topic, but you said never. No, you didn't. You said you did say never meant. No, you didn't. You said something to the effect of 23 years on, if it was just coffee, I still wouldn't be here.
Yeah,
or something
actually, that was what you said.
That was what I said.
Yeah.
But I said that last week to my new hire orientation group, and the fact of the matter is, it is 23. It's almost 24 years on now, and just strong coffee is not enough to hold. It's not enough to hold my attention, it's not enough to hold my staff's attention, and it's quite frankly not enough to hold my customers' attention. And growing that business, certainly you have to execute on lots of different levels, but one of the things that's always driven us is we recognize our business, at least, is very local. We have lots of cafes, they're not that far apart, we're very, very local. We're dependent on our immediate surroundings, which is just another way of saying we're dependent on our community. So we understood just in a bunch of different ways, and this is just our native sense, that we wanted to be a really great community partner. We wanted to partner with our community in ways that made them, and people have said this to us, that they say when they go out on the weekends or whatever, and they go to an event or a thing that they want to do as part of their community participation, we're always there. Colectivo is always there. And what the message is that what the things that they are interested in, we are also supportive of. So we build loyalty in very indirect ways by partnering with all sorts of organizations. I use the Pabst Theater as it's like our best, most complex relationship. And an extension of that is that most of these relationships, business to nonprofit, the standard relationship is what, right? You write a check, right? The nonprofit comes, we want your support. Okay, I'll give you some support. Write a check. That relationship doesn't have a whole lot of durability, so we've worked really hard, and this is an extension. I've never met an idea I didn't want to complicate. When we build our relationships with nonprofits or community groups, we try to figure out how we can leverage the capacity of the community groups so there is value exchanged, not just in one direction. It's not just us to them, it's them to us as well. So as one example, the Florentine Opera, if any of you have been at the lakefront on alternate Thursdays in the summertime, the Florentine does performances at the lakefront because their average subscriber is like halfway to dead. So they want fresh blood, and
We are recording this.
Yeah, that's right. We have a great demographic, so they actually come. You may not know this, but the Florentine comes and performs at the lakefront for free. We don't pay them anything for those performances. They have recognized, it took a little convincing, but they recognize that they want access to our demographic. So it's not like we're scrounging the world for free stuff. That's not the point. The point is that we are building relationships with community groups that are reciprocal, so they are durable and they have a long, long life. And that is one of the ways that it's not just building cafes. We are knitting ourselves into the community in a way that people, whether it's their interest in opera, or their interest in Al's Run, or they're interested in renewable energy, or they're interested in recycled product, or there's just all kinds of stuff that we're working in, and we're just providing lots of different handles for people to grab a hold of and feel like they participate in what we do.
Excellent.
I can't do short.
Please.
Ask questions whenever?
Yes.
So, I'm interested in the financing piece. So you have, weak personal financial statements. There's 3 partners, it sounds like. I'm curious as to how you got a bank interested. Was it about selling the business plan and the vision for Altera? That's kind of my first question. The second maybe would be additional capital at any point in time. Did you consider a private investor? And if so, it seems like you didn't go that route, and I'm kind of curious as to maybe why you didn't go that route as well.
Well,
if you don't mind, I'm going to repeat it just for the sake of the video. So the question, and please correct me if I'm incorrect. How did you seduce the bankers? We know them as fairly conservative. Was it the business plan? Was it your raw animal magnetism? Was it the vision? Or what was it? And then why didn't you choose to go the equity route, to pursue the friends and family money, to have an investor who would get an equity piece, and so on?
We ate dog food long enough that we had enough stuff to collateralize the banking relationship, and that's the simplest expression there. We were fortunate to have success out of the gate, albeit small, but it was enough to provide enough cash flow that we built up a war chest so that the banking relationship became realistic. We had inventory, we had receivables, we had all that good stuff. So that was relatively easy. We just self-financed long enough that it was an obvious thing for the bank to loan us some money.
Can I challenge you to give real numbers?
Like,
when you first went out for that first loan, are we talking 10,000? Are we talking 100,000?
There was no loan. It was a line of credit. And that was critical for us, as we're both a retailer and a manufacturer. So obviously we're giving terms to our wholesale customers. We got money that's out there for 30, typically 45 or 60 days. So we had to finance that gap. We had to finance the green coffee inventory that sat around on our floor. So those were the uses of capital. I can't imagine that line of credit was more than about $300,000 at first. We didn't take a term loan for years. I think the first term loan we took was, it was for when we did the lakefront construction, which totally spiraled out of control. And I think we termed out, it was $350,000 or $500,000.
Wow. So you're doing all of this really on kind of narrow.
Yeah, maybe
leverage.
You think we're like adventurous and risk takers, but we're pretty conservative at heart. I just looked at our balance sheet. Our long-term debt is negative right now. We have no debt, and part of that is through. We've always operated like that, but part of that, to go to your question, private equity or something like that. We know absolutely. At least for us, we're never giving away equity ever. We'll build it ourselves. Equity is the most valuable thing you can possibly have. So we'll never give that away. But we had a kind of a black swan event, or I guess it's a white swan event. The Mars Corporation decided that they wanted to improve what they were doing in the world of single serve. Who has a Keurig coffee maker? Yeah, it's okay, I won't hurt you. Mars has a single serve device as well, but they're all business to business. But their device preceded Keurig, and they were quite frankly pissed off that they weren't having the same kind of success as Keurig was. So they went out shopping for a company. Is this okay? Can I?
Please.
So they approached us. I'm compressing a very long thing into a fewer words. They approached us and said, we want to buy your company because we want to inject what you do into our single serve program so that we can better compete with Keurig. It took us a little while because we're not the brightest bulbs, but it took us a little while to figure out that Mars is this global organization. They have no interest in the bricks and mortar in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. In fact, it's just a liability for them. They're a food manufacturer. They're very keen on food liability. So the fact that we have a bakery really irritated them. But we knew that they would just shut down what we did in Milwaukee, save for a few stores to keep the backstory alive. And when we finally stumbled to that, we were like, well, we can't sell you the company, which was, I mean, you put yourself in my shoes. We built something for like 18 years from zero, and then you have a multinational knock on your door and say, we want to buy your company. I mean, it's tremendously flattering, and it's also tremendously tempting. You know, for people, you guys, that have businesses, all of your net worth is tied up in your organization. Being able to extract it usually means private equity, right? So we knew we had an opportunity here. We just didn't know how to kind of mold it into something that was doable for us. But once we figured out that they didn't want the bricks and mortar, we told them that they didn't want the bricks and mortar, and they said, well, you're right, we don't. So we said, what we'll do is we'll sell you what boils down to 7 letters, A-L-T-E-R-R-A, which is actually 5 letters. So hey, we had 20% bonus right there. And that was the deal. People can't figure this out, and they always thought we sold our company because the deal is so weird. Even our M&A lawyers were like, we've never seen anything like this before. So it was a really weird event. We were able to sell our name, which was a huge roll of the dice for us. I mean, how many of you were a little irritated when Altera went away? You know, that kind of pisses you off. Right, suddenly something you love is gone, or kind of gone. And we were banking on the fact that partially through these reciprocal community relationships and the overall goodwill we'd built in the community, we were rolling the dice to say that we know we're going to have to change our name. As soon as we signed that paper, we knew we were going to have to change our name. It was going to be in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years or whatever. And we thought perhaps hubris played a role that we can manage this, and we can come out the other end and be successful. So that influx of capital also puts yourself point in time. This is 2008, 9, and 10. These negotiations were going on. Financial calamity in the U.S. The banks were not exactly lending money, but somehow we were able to build a $5 million bakery installation in Bayview. That simply would not have happened without that capital. We did the 60th and Wells location in Wauwatosa, which is our only standalone purpose-built cafe that we built from the ground up. That wouldn't have happened without that capital. Internal changes happened as well in the organization. We promoted somebody to COO. This is my brother's comment, that a couple years after this guy took the reins, actually it was like a couple months because it was so obvious, so immediate, that all along we, meaning Ward, Paul, and I, all along we were the problem. The COO is running the company far better than we did. People are happier, people are making more money, the company is making more money, just the whole thing is better. And not to mention I'm not working as much anymore, which is pretty great.
Let's definitely go down that path. First of all, what is your title?
Secretary.
Yeah, and I'll just let you know, in the research, it is not apparent. So we listed him as co-founder and, impresario, raconteur.
Yeah.
It could be just as likely. So in the transition, and once you sold the name, and you actually manifest the name change, you said you hire someone who actually took your real business to the next level. It wasn't as obvious as doubling store count or anything else, but your margin changed, your processes changed. Talk us through what that was like and how you're going to do that again.
Ooh, again, that's a new one. We'll talk about the first piece. For those of you that own or run businesses, I think always be aware that you may not be the best person for the job. We had to get to a certain place to do that transition. But we suck at running a company. We've obviously done some good stuff, but the mechanics of actually operating are different than inventing or creating or making something interesting or creating relationships in the community. It's just a different thing. And we have a guy who is just such a stud. He's a dairy farmer, and he's a refugee from Manpower in their IT group. He does everything. He's like changing the oil on our trucks and then also running a company. But he's just way better at doing this than we were. He's better at communicating with our staff people. He's better at mutually setting goals with them. He's better at following up with them to make sure everybody's still tracking along in the same place. I mean, Leo, he's the sweetest guy in the world, but if you're not doing what you mutually agreed with Leo that you were going to do, you do not want to see Leo. You just don't, because he's a sweet as pie, but he is an absolute bulldog, because he's going to say, hey, we talked about this like 2 weeks ago. We said this is what we were going to do. Why aren't we doing it? Okay, let's talk about this, why it's not happening. We're going to agree on what we're going to do, right? And then he comes around 2 weeks later and like, oh shit. But he's so good at that. And how do you mean do it again?
Well, I'll tell you what you said. We need to carefully meter our growth. Growing is critical to creating opportunity for our staff and keeping our work interesting. However, as we approach 400 people and spread into Madison and point south, which you have done, we need to work diligently to preserve and improve our culture of service and quality. So you haven't said we're not going to grow. And the fact that you're sitting here talking to Scale Up Milwaukee means that you and your partners have some interest in continued growth. How do you do it, and how do you do it profitably and effectively?
This dude does his research, man. It's really good. By far the best interview I've ever sat for.
Well, thank you.
And excellent. We're not going to go the route of private equity and blow out 100 locations. We don't do it because that's not how we're built. But also, if you go into our cafes, they're all handmade. You can't do that at scale like that. So our business is built to grow in an organic fashion, and maybe that'll grow to. We've done 4 locations in a year twice, and that's absolutely pushing our meter to the limit. Maybe you could morph this thing into something where you could iterate 6 or 8 locations a year. If you really got the internals right to do that, you probably could do that. You get your architecture firm to really start to standardize the options for the cafes and kind of do. You'd lose something, obviously, in that translation, but you'd probably come out with something that's pretty good. But we're obviously a quality-oriented organization, and when I talked about that, we were expanding into Madison. Now there are 3 locations in Madison. Those 3 locations all kick ass, but we're learning how to make sure that culture is consistent. Walking into Madison, Leo says he wants to make Madison local. He wants the Madison stores to feel as part of the company as the Milwaukee stores do, and that's an ongoing process. We've not cracked the code on that necessarily. But we're working on how we train, how we recruit, how we support, so those people feel as close to us as the people in Milwaukee do. Chicago we're going to take a lot of what we learned in the expansion of Madison to apply to Chicago. We're going to have to make Chicago local as well. I told my staff the other day that I thought I could probably count on my left thumb the number of organizations that have grown from Milwaukee and taken their brand to Chicago. It's usually the other way around. So we're super excited on what that's going to do for our organization.
I like it. So just for the sake of clarity, in 1992, you cut your thumb off?
Yeah, lopped it off in the high-performance home audio loudspeaker business.
So really, you bled for that business?
I bled hard, but I sold the surgeon 2 pair of loudspeakers that worked on my hand.
I love it.
I did.
I love it.
He was awesome. 6 hours on the table for that one. Yeah, I was so cold when I came out of that surgical suite. I was cold to the bone, and they jacked me on morphine. I was shaking the gurney so hard it was moving around on the floor. That was quite a day. That was a sucky day. But I've been without it now longer than I had it, so it's kind of like normal now. I just turned 50.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Yeah, Sunday.
You had said that it's more than coffee and it's community, but you also do it, like your spaces are incredibly well designed. and you have merch, great merch, like super attractive, well-designed, and then you have all your posters, all your labels are well-designed. Is that was that purposeful and part of it, or was that serendipitous?
No, that's Paul.
Okay.
It's not Paul that does all that, but Paul pushed that DNA in early, and we've always had a way outsized creative department for the size of company we are. We now have a full-time videographer, which was also a promotion from within. He was a barista, and we decided we needed a videographer for the brand transition. We reached out into our staff and found somebody with those chops. So we got somebody to move from barista wage up to full-time. Now he's literally traveling the world. If you look on our website, there are videos from all of our origins. He travels there. But the creative department is deep. Kevin Callahan, and we're very family-oriented. Paul, when he was selling sheepskin slippers, also ran the Pride of Milwaukee, which was in Grand Avenue. You may recall it was on one of the walkways. I had the Harley motorcycle there. His partner in that business was Kevin Callahan. Kevin Callahan, they separated, and Kevin ran his own thing for a while, but circled around back to us. Kevin is our lead graphic designer. So he's responsible for actually a lot of the stuff that you see. Also, we have our secret weapon, which is a husband and wife artist team, which are out of Cascade, Wisconsin now. Joe and Janice Nijelkowski. Joe is a stunningly intelligent and also just incredibly creative. He basically lives, eats, and breathes our company. He's always thinking about it. So when you see the umbrellas, like at the lakefront or at the Shorewood location, if you look at the awnings at the Prospect Cafe, which are now kind of a staple of our program, if you look at the coffee displays and wholesale accounts, if you look at really anything, it's all from Joe and Janice. And then Kevin does all the two-dimensional graphic stuff. Joe doesn't like 2D. He will do it, and he did it for the beginning of the company, but he wants to sculpt and weld. Anyone see the Hand of Man at the Maker Fair out at State Fair Park? It was awesome. Anyway,
That was him.
so that is our creative is internal. It's always been obviously incredibly important to us. You just can't get that by outsourcing that to a firm. You have to live it, and so we have overinvested in that component for forever.
Tom, please.
Lincoln, Caribou Coffee has come and gone. Pete's Coffee has come and gone. We seem to be more in strip malls, where you're more in the communities. Is that the difference, your community involvement, or is there something else that they didn't succeed in Milwaukee?
I'm going to repeat the question. So Caribou, Pete's, sort of franchise model, mall-based, three-wall stores haven't succeeded here. You have made big plays in communities and sort of establishing yourself as connected. Is that their problem, and has that been your success?
Well, if you go to Caribou's home community in Minneapolis or Pete's in the East Bay of San Francisco, they're still there. They're still effective. They've both been bought by a German private equity outfit that also, it's a funny backstory. In the Mars transaction, we went out to Virginia, right down the road from the CIA, to pitch Mars CEO on us. And with him was Olivier, his CFO, two very intimidating people. After that meeting, we said we will no longer take meetings with Paul, the CEO of Mars. He was so intense, like totally Sergeant Rock. But anyway, Olivier, shortly after our transaction, departed Mars and went to work for Benkheiser, the German private equity outfit that then executed the playbook that Mars had been building on the coffee side of things. So Benkheiser went and bought Pete's, they went and bought Caribou, they bought Stumptown, they bought Intelligentsia, they bought Green Mountain Keurig, they bought Dewey Egbert's, which was a big institutional brand. They're trying to build the number 2 coffee concept behind Starbucks, which is a long, long play. I guess the point here, outside of a little entertainment value, is that those concepts are effective in their home markets, but they've now been swallowed up by a very large group, and I think there are inevitable consequences. Very few people can do those kinds of acquisitions and somehow make those things live and successful. They're now part of a larger whole. They're going to lose a lot of their individuality, and that's just the nature of those transactions.
You talked a little bit about life after hiring Leo and how that's been great for the organization. What were the things that got you to the point where you said we need to bring in somebody from the outside to help us?
The question was about determining the factors that suggest that you should hire outside help or bring in outside help.
Well, we actually hired Leo to be our director of wholesale operations, but when we were still in the Prospect building. So he was with us for years, probably 6 or 7 years before we promoted him to COO. And that promotion to COO is a direct reflection of the Morris transaction, which allowed Ward, Paul, and I to take enough risk off the table that we were able to allow people in our organization to fly a little freer. And it had this unknown extra benefit of actually making the company far more profitable and better run. So we wanted to give more opportunity. I said there were some other benefits in the organization, internal benefits. And there are a variety of people that have moved into more senior positions. There's a deferred compensation program for these people now. We've just been able to operate with a much freer hand because all of our net worth is no longer tied up in our company. Does that make sense? Yeah. Oh, sorry. I'm not running the show. I'm sorry.
I'm working with some closely held businesses that often see, or from time to time, see disagreements among the founders. Sometimes that can inhibit growth and inhibit the operation of the business. Did you face any disagreements among your partners, and how did you deal with that or prevent that?
So the question then was about how well the original three, the two brothers and the other guy, get along, and what kind of disagreements or challenges has that created for the growth of the company?
You strike at the very heart of the whole organization. That's an excellent question. It's a reflection of Paul's faith and generosity that he was willing to enter a partnership with a pair of brothers, because you're instantly in the minority. It was a little ridiculous for him to do that, and it's especially ridiculous. We're now 23 years in and we still don't have a partnership agreement. There's no paper. But that's a reflection of the relationship that we have. I mean, sure, something might eventually occur that makes us all punch each other in the face, but the underpinning of our relationship is mutual respect. And some of that grows out of the fact that Paul's good at stuff, Ward's good at stuff, I'm good at stuff. One is not good at the stuff the other's good at. We're far better as a group than individually. And you know, I suppose we've had disagreements. I kind of had a personal little freak out when we were going to do Bayview, because if you remember, there was a bank building there, and we'd like to renovate rather than build new. We tried to renovate on Humboldt and failed, so we had to knock that thing down and build new, which was a small financial disaster. But Bayview, we wanted to renovate the bank building into a food service manufacturing bakery. Like, you're dumb. Like, that's just dumb. And we spun up the drawings and started to get estimates, and like the numbers were like just outsized. I couldn't, and Ward and Paul were like, we're gonna do this. I'm like, no, we're not gonna do this. I'm sorry, I'm putting my foot down, we're not doing this. And they said, okay. And we changed, and we said, what if we knock it down? What does that look like? What can we build? And we ended up with something that's obviously far better. So, I mean, we disagree, but we respect others' opinion, and we navigate a way around to get to a place where we're all happy. Does that make sense?
Are you guys equal partners?
Are you guys equal partners? Thank you for asking that.
Good, also good question. We are, at the outset, you can, if you imagine, you know, the dirt poor speaker manufacturers didn't have a whole lot of equity to throw into the organization. Paul was running a functioning business, had money. The whole thing started with about $110,000. Probably 70% of that was Paul. The majority of the remainder was Ward, and the minority was me. But yes, we're equal partners. There's a whole lot of sweat equity that I think kind of trued up the equation.
Very interesting. Yes.
Quoting you earlier, you said this, and I wrote it down because I thought it was great. You don't learn anything, you're always winning. but from a perception standpoint, you've been winning for quite a long time. So how are you instilling the thought process of always learning, even if you're always winning?
So you know what, I'm gonna repeat. You mentioned earlier that you don't learn if you're always winning. And so the question is, you know, what failures have you experienced that you can use to prove that? And I'm going to challenge you even further. You sort of publicly talk about the creation of the bakery business and that failing for a number of years. But the story of the bakery business is that it's been very, very successful. So I'm going to ask you to not use that as your example.
My favorite one. Oh, that makes it so much harder. All right. Speaker business, failed. Cut off the thumb, failed. Those were tough ones to come back from. Okay, we've had a level of success as we've gone along. If you carve out the bakery, which is, again, my favorite example of failure because that was a total disaster.
Until it wasn't.
Until it wasn't. But I guess that's the nut of it. And I'm not going to just use, I'm not going to back into it that way. But we have had wholesale relationships that have failed. We have had cafes that looked like it was going to be a long, hard go. And some of them are not as successful as we would hope. The Grafton location was a little bit of a flyer for us. We wanted to see how our brand and thing would do in an ex-urban location. And it's fine. It's not obviously something like Humboldt or the Lakefront, but it could be more successful. We've had many failed internal relationships where things went south. We hired somebody to be our director of retail. That failed. And you know, we should have hewed closer to the hire slowly, fire quickly mantra on that one. We've had challenges, if not outright failure. And I think this goes to the relationship. You know, when the shit's coming down and you gotta, you know, bulldog it through, the relationships that you have with your partners and with your organization are critical. And we preach humility. I mean, Milwaukee is rife with humility. We're somehow think we're not good enough, but there's value there, even though there are challenges. And we know that we can get better every day, and that we may get pretty good or might even touch great one day, but it doesn't mean you're going to be great the next day. And we preach that internally. We have to try each and every day to be excellent at what we do. Part of that is the nature of our business. You know, we're relationships across the counter, one transaction after the other. You have to be great at all of those to really have success. So we preach humility in the organization and to strive to be as great as you can. So
I'm going to ask the last question, and you gave me a great segue. If you're okay, I'm going to ask that you stick around for a few minutes and
Sure.
meet some folks. Thank you to the audience. We'll be posting this online as quickly as possible, and we hope to see you next in January for our next Meet the Masters with Peggy Troy. Link to those tickets will be available soon. So there's many, many other things I wanted to ask you about, including your favorite word. But
oh boy.
Yeah, exactly. You should be worried. Segueing from what you just said, a long time ago, you said, not a long time ago, a few years, you said, we have a dangerous amount of humility. And you just connected that to a culture of humility that pervades the Midwest and certainly the Milwaukee region. I would like for your final statement to be an entirely immodest, not humble declaration of your business and the environment in which you have grown your business that can exemplify the ways in which we should be proud of growing businesses in this region.
Oh God. This is not my specialty. Could you just rephrase that just so I can grab a hold of it a little tighter?
So Scale Up Milwaukee believes to our core that we have a lot to be proud of. And in fact, being immodest and objective about the growth of businesses in this region and this region's capacity to grow businesses is something we should talk about frequently. We recently had a meeting where we did nothing but storytelling around growth. It's my job to celebrate and to promote the stories of growth that we have here. So I'm going to ask you to tell your story of growth immodestly. Don't be nice about it. And to talk about growing a business very successfully in this region.
When we talk about what we do, whether it was building loudspeakers or roasting coffee, the common thread there, or selling sheepskin slippers, the common thread there is that we want to do something really, really well. It is part of what keeps me engaged, is that we want to create a level of complexity in the organization that is attractive and interesting. But to create that kind of complexity, to create the relationships with the community, to do the coffee sourcing, to build handcrafted cafes, to teach and coach internally so that we compete with anybody in the world of coffee, we have to do the work. And that is one thing that we are very good at here, is doing the work. And we undersell perhaps the results of that work, but if you want to be great, you have to do the work. There are people in my culture, my industry, it's like bikes. There is so much bullshit that is told in the world of coffee, all about the world travel and the carefully crafted and finding just the right coffee bean. It's a bunch of shit. And it's so tiring. I can't stand it, because my organization is built on delivering the real deal all the way through, top to bottom, vertically integrated. We source the coffee, we roast the coffee, we create the environments, we build them with our hands. We built a bakery, which was a financial disaster to start, because we wanted to control the entire customer experience. We designed and built our own outdoor furniture. We're an outdoor furniture manufacturer now, even though we're a coffee roaster, which is our primary business, by the way. But we want to manage that whole thing. Your experience, from what you sit in, to the bakery that you get, the customer service that you get, the latte that is delivered to you, the relationships that we are recognized for. We do the work, and occasionally we will say that we're good at it because people ask us to. But I think the underpinnings of our success is the willing to buckle down and do the work, and to not be afraid to reach for greatness.
Please thank our guest. Thank you, Fowler.
That was excellent.
That was great. Thank you. I really appreciate it. We'll see y'all soon. Yeah. Let's go do some work. Elizabeth and Heather and Maddie will collect evals. Yeah,
I've never had an interview even close to that. You did an excellent job.
I really appreciate it. Oh yeah, we should do the picture thing.
That was great.